Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Everything is Tragic with Hilary Starr. I am your host, Hilary Starr. Welcome everyone. As you can hear, my sexy sick voice is in full throttle. I hope this voice never leaves. I'm just going to keep coughing aggressively for the rest of my life. I am going on week 2 of flu-like symptoms. I'm not contagious anymore, I don't think, but I am coughing, and I'm surprised I'm not coughing anymore. I think I coughed my lungs out shortly before hitting record, so I should be fine. But there was no episode last week because I had the flu really bad, and the week before was Thanksgiving. I hope everybody's Thanksgiving was great. Pretty sure it was better than mine. My mom was in DR, thriving, living her best life, spending time with my grandma. And I was suffering here with my dad, who doesn't know how to cook, let alone order takeout for Thanksgiving, because my sister's boyfriend got food poisoning and I got the violent shits from this restaurant that we ordered from. But we're here, we're thriving, we are doing our best. So hopefully my parents are not listening to this episode, because Mom and Dad, this is your tape. This episode is for my minority kids out there, to my Asian minorities, to my East Asian, Indian, Pakistani, all my Middle Eastern, Mediterranean even, and Hispanic, and even Black, African, all the good stuff. All of my first generation immigrant children out there who have struggled growing up as a first generation. You know, you see the memes nowadays and you're just like laughing at it. But when you really think about it, like what we went through growing up, you're just like, how, a lot of things make sense. I can see why I am the way that I am. I can see why I have the absolute worst people-pleasing tendencies. I can see why I feel the need to make someone happy the moment I sense that I'm making them upset. It's one of those things that I'm just like, where did this come from? And it's like, well, being raised by short-tempered Dominican parents, that'll do it. That'll do it. So I feel like I need to start from the beginning. You always got to start from the beginning, because there's always an origin to these type of stories. And before I get into it, I just want to let you guys know my parents are amazing people. Trust me, if my parents were shit people, I would not be afraid to say it. My parents are amazing people. Every intention they had in raising me, it was always with good intention. I feel like they just went about it the wrong way in a lot of things, where I'm just like, hey, if you grew up in the United States, I feel like I would have had a very different life. Probably not a happier life, because I had a happy childhood. I'm happy that I can say my parents gave me the best childhood that they could give me. But I feel like it could have been better. And you'll understand what I'm talking about. If you're listening, I just want to show off the fact that I'm wearing a vintage Millennium Backstreet Boys tour shirt. I don't want to say how much it was, but I got it from a thrift store in California. So that should tell you enough how expensive it was. So we're just going to get right into it. Sit back, relax. Let's shed a few tears together. Let's die a little inside. So starting off, my parents came to New York along with millions of other Dominicans in the early 90s. I don't know what it is with New York and Dominicans. Same thing with Puerto Ricans. I don't know what it was with New York and, these Caribbean people. It was always Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. It wasn't a lot of, Cubans. But then, there was a lot of Mexicans here, a lot of Colombians, Ecuadorians, Salvadorians, Venezuelans. But I haven't met a lot of Cubans. It's actually really interesting. But anyways, so my parents emigrated to New York back in the early 90s. They wanted to move to a quaint white neighborhood, because that's what every minority parent wants to do. They want to move in with the whites. I don't know what it was with my parents being so obsessed with living in white neighborhoods, or neighborhoods that were predominantly white. I get it. My parents wanted me to go to a good school. They wanted me to live in a neighborhood where it was safe. like I mentioned in the beginning, every intention that my parents had were good, but it was also like, I know your intentions were good, but it was also like, maybe we should have like grown up in a neighborhood where there was like a little bit of diversity, because I was completely whitewashed and I didn't really get in touch with my Dominicanness and my Dominican culture until I was way older. I'm talking like early 20s. If my stomach is growling and you can hear it, then this is an amazing microphone. I have my mic pretty close to my stomach. I hope you can't really hear my stomach growling. What should I eat today? Anyways, so I think I might order Indian food. But okay, so getting back to this episode. So I started out in Queens, which the area that I grew up in was heavily Indian and Filipino, I think, and Black. And I loved growing up in that neighborhood. It was Belrose, for those of you that live in New York, specifically in Queens. I grew up in Belrose. I went to PS33 for elementary school, but then I went to Long Island for the rest of elementary school, because my teacher taught in Long Island, and she told my parents that the school systems were not advanced in Queens, and I would get a better education in a white school, pretty much, in a school in Long Island where they had better funding. And it was very true. When I got to this new school, I was learning shit that I was not going to learn for years in my other school in Queens, which should tell you something about like, these poor neighborhoods and like the school systems and the education, like in these white neighborhoods, like they put money into the schools, like infrastructure, education, like the programs and stuff, into the arts. They really put their money's worth into these schools. Did it make a difference in me? No, because I always hated school, so I really didn't give a shit about that. And that really reflected on my report cards, because I was never a good student. Math, oh my God, math was my worst subject. I needed a tutor every year. And I understand the frustration with my parents, because my parents didn't speak a lick of English. So them trying to teach me how to do math and how to do my reading homework and English homework, it was always very hard. So I always had tutors. There was always that disconnect. But when I went to like kindergarten to third grade in PS33 in Queens, the school was heavily minority based, and it had a lot of students where like a lot of parents didn't speak English. Like English was not their first language. Like my one neighbor was Filipino, and her parents didn't know English. And my other neighbors, she was Pakistani, and her parents didn't know a lick of English, but they were my best friends. And my parents somehow were able to talk to these parents. So, even though they didn't speak the same language, they somehow still understood each other. If there's one thing New Yorkers are going to do, they're going to communicate, even if the language is not the same. And I think that's like a good first point to go to when it came to growing up with parents that didn't speak English. My parents didn't really go to parent-teacher conferences, and if they did, I had to do the translating. And if I did not know what the fuck the teachers were saying because I was in second grade, that was one thing. I'm pretty sure, I have a vague memory of going to extra help, like ESL type shit, because I had issues with not my vocabulary, but more learning how to speak, because technically my first language was Spanish, and then I was learning English in school. The TV I used to watch, growing up watching Hey Arnold, Rugrats, Barney. You know how there's alcoholics, people loving their alcohol? I was a Barney-holic. I had Barney slippers, I had Barney bed sheets, toys, plushies, all that good shit. I think Barney came out with like mac and cheese at one point, and I made my mom buy me that. Oh no, it was a Rugrats. But yeah, no, I was heavy on Barney. So Barney taught me how to sing, how to dance, how to speak, how to read. My cousin, who was a little older than me, she taught me how to read in Spanish and also in English. So I learned a lot of English through television and music. Thank you, Backstreet Boys. Shout out. And Britney Spears and Celine Dion. Those were like the top 3 artists that I started listening to really heavily when I started learning how to speak. So it was like Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, NSYNC, Celine Dion. Did I say Celine Dion? Who else did I used to listen to a lot? Oh my God, there were so many artists, but those were the big ones. And Barney, of course, Barney and Friends. So then, I had tutors growing up. My mom wasn't good with like math and stuff. My dad was good at math, but my dad was working all day. My mom also wasn't a stay-at-home mom. So I always had babysitters, but my mom was very present. It was like weird because it was like, I vaguely remember being raised by my mom that much in like the early years, but I still remember my mom raising me throughout. Like my mom stopped hiring babysitters after my sister was born. So like maybe 2002-ish. So like I had babysitters all throughout like my toddler to like child years. But then after that, I had no more babysitters. But my mom was still very present in those years, even though I had babysitters. My mom never let me, when Harry Potter came out, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, when it came out on video cassette tape, she bought me the video cassette tape. It was great. She didn't know English, so she had no idea what the fuck she was buying me until she caught me watching the movie and she was like, wizards? No, she threw it out. And then she bought me Lord of the Rings, having no idea that it was about like warlocks and wizards. And she also threw that out. That was always so funny because I wanted to watch Harry Potter so bad, but she never let me watch it. My mom never sent me to school for Halloween because she didn't believe in, well, I was also raised Christian, which I understand that part, but there was also like those Christian parents where like they didn't celebrate Halloween, but they would take their kids trick-or-treating at least. Like they wouldn't decorate, they wouldn't celebrate Halloween, but they would take their kids trick-or-treating after work, after school, let their kids dress up as a mummy, run out of toilet paper and just dress them up as a mummy real quick and take them trick-or-treating. But no, my mom wouldn't even send me to school. So I never got that experience of having the Halloween parties or going to another classroom. You remember when they used to do that? I used to only hear about it. I remember the Christmas parties. I remember those where I used to go to other classrooms and like we would have like joint Christmas parties. And I would bring in like cookies from Kifu, like the N&M's. You know what I'm talking about? The soft cookies. Yeah, those were always so much fun. But then I was always like, damn, I wonder what these parties must have been like on Halloween. If you hear my neighbor's dog barking, I'm so sorry. I can't do anything about it. So yeah, so then in that area of like my childhood, I was able to have a good time without realizing, hey, this could have been better. I don't know if this was a minority thing, but I wasn't always allowed to have every toy I wanted. Every time I went to Toys R Us or like Target, it was usually like the Targets. My mom didn't take me to Toys R Us that much. I grew up pretty fine. We weren't struggling financially, which, is a blessing. We weren't really struggling. Like we weren't rich, but we were well off. Like my parents were able to provide for me and stuff, but my mom never like willingly took me to toy stores and bought me toys. I don't know if this is a minority thing. This might just be my mom's personality, but we never went to toy stores. I never had the chance to like, pick a toy and my mom would buy me toys, but it wasn't always like she would just take me to Toys R Us to buy me toys, or like we would be at Home Depot, at TJ Maxx or like a Target, and it was very rare for her to say yes to buy me a toy. And again, I don't know if that was a minority thing, but I don't know. She always said no. And yeah, I had a lot of toys. It was Christmas, but yeah, so I mean, you guys can let me know. Like, if you're a minority, did your parents ever take you to toy stores? Like when all these ads would run, like the zoo books, the zoo pals, those plates with the animal faces on them, Floam, all these fucking toys, the moon shoes, all these toys that would show up on TV, and I wanted them so bad, and my mom wouldn't buy them for me. That shit would tear out my heart, tear me from limb to limb. And again, I don't know if it's a minority thing, but I'm just going to share it as if it's a minority thing because I've spoken to other minorities and they've also said the same things, like their parents being really restrictive on like not getting them toys that they wanted. And Andrew, my husband, who is white, raised by parents who grew up in the US, American, born and raised, he would get all these fucking toys. Like if he wanted something and it was like a TV order, because you got to know English on how to order this stuff. My parents didn't understand the concept of ordering stuff on the TV and ordering toys on the TV. They just saw it as expensive plastic that didn't need to be having their hard-earned money spent on. My dad was a salesperson for a hair product distributing company. Like it was a company that distributed different brands of hair care products, and he worked his way from like a delivery guy to like a manager. So my dad worked his way up and now he's a manager. He's been in the same company for almost 30 years and now he's so far into this managing position, this sales manager position, where like he'll wake up at 11-12 p.m. and he'll go to work at 2 p.m. and we're like, bro, you're going to work now? And he'll come home at like 5 p.m. And he's like, yeah, it was a good day at work. I'm like, bro, did you even go to work? But honestly, love to see it. He's worked so hard since I was a kid to provide me, my sister, and my mom a good life. And I really appreciate that. And my mom too. My mom was a hustler. She was, the cliche Hispanic women, the cleaning ladies. And it was crazy because like, I'll admit this now, but I was embarrassed of my mom being a cleaning lady. This conversation is going to go through different paths. Eventually I'll find my way, but if I don't, that's totally fine because talking about growing up as a minority, it can go with so many different ways. So whichever direction this goes, it's going to be the direction that it goes in. But my mom was a cleaning lady since I was born, and her and my aunt started doing it when I was a baby. So my mom has always been a hard worker. She was never the type to be a stay-at-home mom, but eventually she did become a stay-at-home mom after my sister was born for a little bit, and then she went back to work. But my mom was a cleaning lady, and I remember being embarrassed in elementary school, middle school, and even like high school when people would ask me like what my parents did. I would have no problem telling people that my dad was like a manager or something. But the moment that people would ask me what my mom did, I would say like, oh, she cleans. But like I was never confident enough to say that she was a cleaning lady, which is like, why would you be embarrassed of your mom hauling ass and hustling, working hard to provide for you, you ungrateful dickhead? Like I would be like twerking to High School Musical 2 in the basement with my sister, and like my mom's like scrubbing bathrooms for people, and I'm over here like embarrassed to say like what she did. Like my mom was a really hard worker, and I hate that I always grew up with that embarrassment of like, damn, my mom was a cleaning lady. And now I'm like, yeah, my mom makes bank cleaning houses. She's her own little business owner or whatnot. And I really hate that I was embarrassed for so many years. I remember when I was a kid, when I would get sick, or on days that like I just wouldn't go to school, I would go to work with her. And those were always the funnest days because I never knew where I was going. I just knew I was going with my aunt and my mom. We would haul ass to like bumblefuck Long Island to some big ass white people's houses and like clean their houses. And I would sometimes help, but for the most part, I would go into the kids' rooms and I would play with the Barbies and the Bratz dolls, and I would play with the toys that I always wanted, but I never had, but I always found those toys in those houses, so I would be super hyped. So then I don't know if I mentioned this, but my parents always wanted me to grow up in white neighborhoods because it was safer, and my parents are very whitewashed Dominicans, so they wanted me to be a whitewashed Dominican. They wouldn't say it, but they had me growing up in these neighborhoods. If you see the music I started listening to, you could 100% tell that I was whitewashed from the start, but like my mom would play like Juan Luis Guerra and like Camilo Sesto. Like she would play all the good Spanish music, and she would watch the Telemundo. She would watch Laura, Caso Cerrado. You guys remember that? She would watch Caso Cerrado, and like Mujeres Casos de la Vida Real, which was like I could understand why my mom became more and more paranoid the older I got, because my mom would watch these shows and it was just watching like these documentaries, these mini documentaries of like girls getting raped and kidnapped and killed because like they went out for ice cream with their friend and then they never came home that night. Or like my mom always watched the fucking news, and I don't know about you guys, but Hispanic news, I posted a TikTok about this a long time ago, and you guys were vouching for this, for those of you that follow me on TikTok, how traumatizing these news people are on Telemundo and Univision. Like they'd be reporting the wildest shit, and my parents would just be sitting there soaking it up, all scared to like send me back to school. And I'm like, guys, come on. Like, there's a reason why you're like this. Like, there's a reason why we have this trauma, and we need to work through it hard, because what is going on? So, my parents became more and more paranoid the older I became, and that is where we started to clash a lot. And this is where the childhood trauma and the trauma of being a first generation Dominican American really comes into play. But yeah, like my mom was like that typical, like Saturday mornings, like you wake up, if you're sleeping past 10 p.m., she's coming into the room, she's opening the blinds, and like you just hear that music blasting, and she's like, wake up, do something productive. Like you were never allowed to have a lazy day in this fucking household. You had to wake up and do something productive with your time. If it wasn't homework, it was cleaning. If it wasn't cleaning, my mom didn't make me cook, because she would always do it, but eventually she wanted me to learn how to cook, but I never gave a fuck about doing that. And I also wasn't a good student, so you would never catch me studying. But yeah, so growing up in a Hispanic household, I mean, what else is there to say? Like, the pots and pans were stored in the stove. We have the bags and the bags in the plastic bags, which were in the plastic bags and stored in the plastic bags. We have that one cabinet dedicated to all the Tupperware, and every time you opened it, everything would fall out. But my mom somehow had it very organized, but I always fucked it up whenever I put them away. My mom would clean with so much Fabuloso. I used to go to school and people could smell the Fabuloso radiating off of my pores. Yeah, and so moving on with like my school years, I started getting into that phase of school where like people were starting to make friends. Like this is like middle school, high school, and I started making friends, but I wasn't allowed to go to people's houses, which is why I feel like I didn't have my own friends, because it was so hard for my mom to trust anybody to let me go to their house, because they have dads. And like I get it now, like I do understand, but it's like, come on, at least get to know some of the parents, because like there's no way that you could shelter me that much and like rid me of having a childhood where like I can reminisce on like prank phone calling boys at 10 p.m. with my friends, I was allowed to go to the mall with my friends, but that was very rare. It was really rare for my mom to let me do something like that. And if she allowed me to do something like that, again, that was a miracle if I was allowed to do that. This is where my relationship with my parents started to get a little rocky, okay? So I got older, more mature. My tits are coming in, my ass is looking fire. Andrew and I are dating, we're in our honeymoon phase. And my parents start giving me these unbelievable curfews that were like sending me over the edge. Like jumping off the Empire State Building was looking like a wet dream for me because it was just getting too much. And it was like, is it because my parents are minorities, or is it just because they want to fuck with me and they just want to be assholes and not let me have this freedom? And it was 100% because they were minorities. Like, yeah, there were those minority families where like, the kids got older and so the parents started letting loose a little bit. But for the most part, like from minorities that I've spoken to in the past few years, you guys have also spoken about how it was kind of the same situation that I had, where like you had curfews, you weren't allowed to drink. My mom is huge on the drinking, like not liking alcohol or anything, but it's just one of those things. Again, I hope she's not listening, but it's just one of those things where I'm like, I drink. I don't drink heavily. I haven't drank in like a month and a half. Alcohol is not something that like I start drinking and I'm like, ooh, I think I'm gonna become addicted. And my mom's theory is like, you have a sip of wine and you're gonna become addicted. And I understand where she's coming from because she was raised around alcohol and she had like an alcoholic father. Like, I get that, but it's again, going back to the whole, you can't change your parents who are set in their ways. You just have to kind of go with the flow or cut them off. And me, I just go with the flow. I don't tell my mom that I drink. I'm just like, yeah, I drink sometimes, maybe not at all, but I drink way more than I lead her to believe. And so like in that age of like 20, 21, where like my cousins were going out, I was a designated driver because I wasn't allowed to drink. And also my mom would be able to smell the liquor and I would go out. But if I went out with my cousins, I was able to stay out way later because I was going out with my cousins who were older than me and my mom trusted them with her life. And so it was easy for me to, go out with them without having to worry about a curfew. But the moment that I asked to go out, my mom would give me the biggest attitude. If it was with Andrew, if it was with friends. Like, I remember the first time my mom found out that I had sex, it was at a bad time. It was at a time where I had a UTI and I had an ovarian cyst that ruptured. Ooh, child, when I tell you, that was like the most awkward 2 weeks of my life because my mom didn't speak to me for about 2 weeks because I was having like these pains and I fucked up and I said to her, oh, Andrew is so relieved that I'm not pregnant or something. She was like, why would he think that you're pregnant? And I'm just like like I definitely dug myself a huge hole because why the fuck would I say some shit like that? Obviously my mom would assume I was having sex. But again, this is where it goes to me being the first child, being the experiment child. My sister had it so much easier. My sister was able to have a boyfriend in high school. And I'm like, you Dominican family, you, Vilma and Oscar, you guys are allowing my sister to have a boyfriend in high school when I wasn't even allowed to go to my prom? Okay? Where are my minorities that weren't allowed to go to their proms? Or I see you, or have graduation parties? I see you. You are being heard. Yeah, I wasn't allowed to do none of that shit. My sister went to her prom. My sister had a good life. She had a boyfriend out of high school. That kid was a piece of shit. That kid was a work of art. And you couldn't tell my sister shit about that guy, but I saw right through him. She has been released from the shackles, thank God. But yeah, no, like, it's unbelievable. and then I wonder, I think to myself, how different would my life be if I was the younger sister and my sister was the older sister? Would I be happier? Would I be less stressed out? Would I be the medical student? Like, how different would my life have been if I was the minority, if I was the younger sis, if I was the younger sibling? And it's, and then that was the age also where I started getting more in touch with my Dominican roots. Like, I've always had like, good awareness of being Dominican. Like, my mom always cooked Dominican food, the rice and the beans and the plátanos and the mangú, and listening to Juan Luis Guerra, like listening to merengues, all the classic merengues and bachatas. Like, I grew up Dominican. I grew up being raised as a Dominican, but lifestyle wise, my mom wanted me to grow up as like American, like white American, like listening to ABBA. Like, my mom also loved ABBA, and that's why I'm obsessed with ABBA, because of my mother. And living in white neighborhoods where like I'm exposed to nothing but white culture, hot dogs and hamburgers and 4th of July. And I hate that. I hate that, like, my parents come from a country that's so racist and so embedded in racism and discrimination, segregation, that like they brought that with them when they came to New York, that they wanted to get away from their own culture and they wanted to integrate with white people because it was known as like the posh, like the neighborhood to live in, and I was just like, big fucking deal. Like, I am still shaking my ass and going to the ghetto to shake my ass now at 27. Like, I go shake my ass in Astoria, which isn't the ghetto, but it's not the safest area to go shake your ass in at 3 a.m. And like, this just goes to show that no matter where your parents raise you, no matter what your parents try to do with you, at the end of the day, you're going to make your own decisions. You're going to make your own path, have your own future lined up for yourself, because at the end of the day, your future is what matters and your life is what you make it. Don't live your life for your parents. If there's one thing that you can take away from this entire episode, it's never live your life for your parents, because you're going to live a very sad life. And that's something that I have grown to do, because again, trying to break apart from that, becoming more independent, focusing on myself and focusing on my happiness instead of focusing on, will I make my parents proud? Like, me choosing this career of like being a content creator, I was terrified of like not making my parents proud. But my parents are so supportive. My dad is always asking me, oh, when's the next campaign? Or like, my dad's always trying to speak like me in my cooking videos, which is very cringe. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's cringe, but I love it. I would prefer that over parents who don't support me, parents who would frankly be embarrassed of acknowledging that like I'm a content creator. Like, the one thing that like I will say I've had to work through is like not giving a fuck about what my parents think about me. And those are like the last two people that I will say, oh, I don't care what they think. At the end of the day, you're gonna care what your parents think, especially if you grew up, in a loving and caring home, and knowing that your parents did everything they could to raise you right, to raise you with love. To raise you with so much love and compassion, and for you to care about others. You don't want to make them, upset. You don't want them to ever regret moving to the United States, or you don't want them to regret ever having you. Have you ever had those moments where you're like, God damn, do my parents regret having me? I've had it several times. But like recently, no. My parents should be fucking proud of having a daughter like me. I wish my mom got caught up with some of these skanky ass hoes that I had to hang out with sometimes in school, and see them and watch their behaviors. And I'm just like, And my mom used to take away my DS in the middle of the night, and that was her biggest worry. She would have had bigger fish to fry if I was living my life like so-and-so from middle school. I don't understand. Like, I joined the swim team because I was such a pick-me in middle school, goddamn. But I joined the swim team in middle school because I thought that it would get me the attention from all the boys. It didn't, okay? It did not get me the attention. But I also did it because my dad was a swimmer when he was in like college, and he wanted me to follow in his footsteps of being a swimmer. And swimming, one of my favorite forms of exercise. And I joined the swim team for my dad, but also because I wanted to be like the hot girl in school. But once I started noticing that my shoulders were getting really broad and my hair was suffering through a lot of breakage, I was like, this is not for me. One last thing that I'll say about being raised by parents where English was not their first language, and then I'm going to get into your answers, your responses that I asked the question to, for you guys to tell me some of the hardships that you went through growing up as a minority in the United States, first generation to be specific. Taking advantage of the fact that my parents' first language was not English, I was able to get away with doing a lot of shit. And my parents' cluelessness and like no self-awareness of like a lot of things, like cultural things, like things that I used to do, like things like on Facebook, because my mom, since my parents weren't super technologically advanced and because everything was in English, I was able to kind of like play the field to the best of my ability with like, whether it was making a secret Facebook when Facebook first became a thing, making an AIM, like I couldn't have an AIM, I couldn't have a MySpace, like, but I was able to get away with doing a lot of secretive shit because of the language barrier and because my parents didn't grow up in the States, and that was able to give me that kind of step up where I was able to do a lot of sneaky shit. If there's one thing that strict parents know how to do, they know how to raise some sneaky ass motherfuckers. Okay, so I asked you guys to send me your responses to the prompt. Tell me what it was like being raised as a first generation immigrant child. Does that make sense? Hope so. And I'm just going to read a few of your responses and respond to that. So the first one that was said a lot was translating paperwork to enroll in school. Now, I will say this. When I would get my report cards and stuff, I used to try to fluff it where like my parents couldn't really read the notes that teachers would leave. Like, she needs to show improvement. Like, my parents wouldn't understand that. So I would tell them like, no, they're saying that I'm doing well. And my parents would believe me. My parents wouldn't give me money for the book fair. Now that like we're getting to the end of the episode, I'm getting the ideas that I wanted to say in the middle of the episode that now they're coming to light. I was never given more than like $15 to go to the book fair. And $15 was not enough. I used to get the jumbo pencils and like the jumbo erasers, but like that was it. I never got books, but I wanted more of those knickknacks and I didn't have money for that. But the white kids always got $40, $50 and they would always leave with like giant posters and shit. And then I would leave with a pencil that said, "You're doing great." I needed that motivation. Yeah, but translating paperwork to enroll in school, that shit was the worst. Like I mentioned before, like with college, when I was going into college, that shit was impossible. Because like I needed help with like enrolling and everything, but my parents didn't know anything. They didn't know anything. Like, forget the language barrier. They just didn't even know how the process was to enroll in college. And I had to find people to help me, like guidance counselors. And my dad had to find like older people in church that like just graduated college or who were in college to help me out with everything, which is embarrassing. This one is kind of like along the same realm, but it says reading documents to tell my parents what they mean when I don't understand. Like, I would read shit that like my parents had to like fill out, like tax forms and like medical forms that like they would be asking me to help them with. And I'm like, I'm 12. I don't know what a W-2 is, Mom. Please understand. I don't know what that is. My girl Erica just said no sleepovers. Lol. No, literally. It was the fucking worst. I used to hate it when I would go to school on Mondays and then I would hear everybody talking about their sleepovers and they're like, oh my God, yeah, like she slept over and like we watched movies and like we snuck out and we went to Jeremy's house and like the boys were having a sleepover and I'm just sitting there like, yeah, I hope you bitches get caught or kidnapped or something. Like, go fuck yourselves. Okay, next one was not me, but my boyfriend. He said having a pet, cat or dog, or having sleepovers were non-existent. Here's the one thing I'll say. Hispanic parents are fake as fuck when it comes to pets because they say they don't want them and then we get them and then they end up loving the pet more than they love their kids. That's exactly what happened when we got our first dog. My mom treated that dog like it was her fucking kid. And then we had to give him away because he bit my sister. We should have given my sister up and not the dog. But, you know, what can you do in a moment like that? God forbid I said something like that. I would have gotten in trouble. But after that, we got Tiny, God rest her soul. And my mom did not want a new dog after my first dog, Teddy. But my mom loved Tiny more than she loved us. And that is all I'll say about that. Someone said guilt about everything. Oh yeah, you know, parents love to make you feel guilty about everything, but immigrant parents make you feel even worse. Like I said, immigrant parents will always use the I didn't come to this country for nothing excuse. Oh my, it's right there. That excuse is right there in the palm of their hands. They will use that for anything. Like, I brought you into this world. I didn't come to this country with $2 and on Camelback for you to be treating me like this. Like, nobody fucking asked you to come to New York in the prime of crime and for you to live in some room, okay, and then have me. I didn't ask to be born, because that's also the thing a lot of parents don't realize. They talk to us like we made a choice to make them pregnant. Like, bitch, I did not have sex. I did not go through that, okay? Trust me, I wouldn't have done that if I had the option. Next one says, learned English and Spanish at the same time. Strict house, never believed in Santa Claus, drank coffee at 5. I love the never believed in Santa Claus. My parents tried to preserve that from me. I know a lot of minority households don't do that, where like they will, you know, preserve the whole Santa Claus thing. Like, but I found out very early. It was by accident too. Like, I found the Santa Claus costume that my dad would wear every year, and that kind of ruined it for me. Coffee at 5. I was drinking coffee pretty early too, but I didn't like it that much as a kid, so I didn't get addicted to it that quickly, but I 100% know what you're talking about. Next one says, having to mature at such a young age and to hide my emotions really well. This one hit really deep because I had to learn how to not let my emotions get the best of me, because according to immigrant parents, there's no such thing as depression and anxiety. You're just sad, you're just poor, and you just need to go to school and work a little harder, study a little harder, distract yourself a little better, because that is the only way that you'll be happy in life. Not going to therapy, not acknowledging your trauma. No, that's not the answer, because that's weakness. You can't even show emotion, because then it's weakness. God, I am the way that I am because of my fucking parents. Hold on, let me process this real quick. It's a sad reality. Even now, my dad has developed really bad anxiety, and no matter how much I try to tell him, like, Dad, this is a long time coming. Like, you've always been an anxious person. He's like, no. I'm like, bro. I'm like, okay, all right, but you do you, boo boo. But yeah, no, I always had to hide my emotions well. I couldn't really say what I was feeling because it was a sign of weakness, and also my feelings always got pushed to the side. I always got criticized. That's why I say I was made for social media, because nothing can fucking tear me up like a hate comment from my parents. Okay? Not hate comments online from like Susan with an anime profile photo. Like, you really think a hate comment from some stranger in Ohio with an anime profile is going to do something to me? No, Trust me. I've been raised by my parents all my life. I think I've gotten enough hate comments to develop a tough enough backbone to realize, hey, maybe these hate comments on TikTok aren't so bad. Y'all don't know hate comments until you grow up as an immigrant child of first generation. Next up, translating for parents, advocating for self, parents, little sis, torn between cultures. Oh my God. Like I understand this. My sister, I'm like the mediator of the family now, because now that I'm older and I don't live with my parents anymore, I see things from a different point of view. So when my sister calls me with her bullshit, I call my mom to get an understanding of her bullshit, and then I report back to my sister and I try to mediate. I try to bring resolutions, and I hit my sister with the, trust me, you have it way better than I had it back. Because at the end of the day, it is true. Like my sister has it so much better compared to how I used to have it. Like I wish I had the struggles that my sister has. Like my mom has gotten worse, but I think it's also age and menopause. But my mom has definitely gotten worse with her attitudes, with her side comments that like can really set someone off. But me, I've learned to just ignore and be like, okay. I love this. This is the same thing, but this just sounds so funny. Being my parents' personal assistant and translator at every appointment and phone call, doctor's appointments were always a hellscape for me because I always have to translate everything. I'm like, Mom, why can't you find Spanish doctors? And then she only found Spanish doctors. And that was a point where like I knew Spanish, but the Spanish was so fast at that time where I just could not keep up with it. That's what kills me. I was the kid looking out my window, watching my friends play in the street. Rikers Island. Oh my God, stop. That's so painful. I know exactly what that's like. There's nothing more painful than standing in your window and like just watching the kids playing, and it's like dark out and you're just like, bro, can I go outside? And they're just like, no. And like, I was able to play outside and like do all that stuff, but not always. It was like on a good day where my mom actually let me go out and play. If my cousins were there, oh yeah, no, because my cousins were older. They were like 4 or 5 years older than me. So they were like my guardians. So like I was able to go out with them and play in the street until 10, 11 p.m. in the summer. And that was my escape. That was my way of being able to play outside late at night. Someone said, oh, so many things. Friends not getting why I couldn't sleep over or why I didn't have an allowance. Oh my God. Having to explain to your friends why you weren't allowed to sleep over was a completely different thing. Explaining it to other Hispanic kids was so easy. I'm just like, yeah, I'm Hispanic. They get it. But when I had to explain it to other people, like white people or other minorities where like their parents weren't as strict, it was so fucking hard. And I'm just like, if only you knew. Okay, this last one is just perfect to top it all off, to end it. Learn everything on my own, and I still don't know what I'm doing. I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing. How the fuck am I here right now? How have I gotten to 27? I filed my taxes on my own for the first time this year. Last year it was my dad, and the year before that, yeah, it was also my dad. But I have not been able to do things on my own because I was always left to fend. I was always left to depend on my parents and depend on their help and lean against them because my parents always wanted me to depend on them, but they always wanted me to be independent. But I don't know what their version was of independent living, because that most certainly was not independent living. I'm still lost. I lean on Andrew like he's my fucking dad. But that'll do it for today's episode of Everything is Tragic with Hilary Starr. I have been your host, Hilary Starr. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will see you guys next week. Make sure to follow me on all my social media platforms. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in. I'm having so much fun doing these episodes, being able to trauma dump and share all my ideas and thoughts with you guys. It's a lot of fun, but I hope you guys take care. Bye.